Hello again, Bat fans! Today I ask a simple question. Was Jason Todd a good Robin? And to answer these, we have to check out more stories in the Batman and Detective comics from the late 80s, where Jason was part of the dynamic duo. Of course, there are also a couple of stories where Jason doesn't appear, but it's all part of the history of the Batman comics, so we check them out anyway. The first comic is Batman 412. In this book, a new villain is introduced. She calls herself Mime, but her real name is in fact Camilla Cameo, and her origin story is most strange. She liked silence so much that she decided to become a mime as a professional career. Camilla then started a mime company and did some live shows in Gotham, but the government soon cancelled the funding for her shows and she spent all her money trying to keep the show going. Camilla ended up broke and her business was ruined. She blamed Gotham for her misfortune, and to take revenge against the city, she started a quest to make Gotham completely silent. Using her mime outfit, she stole bell clappers from churches and sabotaged rock concerts. In the end, she is stopped by Batman and Robin, but because she never speaks, we never truly understand her character. This one is a weird story, for a weird enemy. As someone who likes silence, I understand Camilla, but that doesn't mean she is a good villain. She reminds me in the opposite way of Ali Babel, the guy who wouldn't stop blabbering from the Golden Age. Remember him? Oh, if you've watched the Golden Bat series, I'm sure you do. Anyway, in this story Robin doesn't take much part. Although he is in the story, he is simply there to make a couple of puns and help Batman. And also to ask him about religion, a question that Batman dodges perfectly. In the next issue, Batman 413, Batman and Robin have to protect some very valuable items and relics from ancient Japan that arrive to the Gotham Museum. The twist is that the heroes have to protect the items from what seems to be the ghost of an ancient Japanese warrior. The dynamic duo investigate the case and they eventually solve the mystery when they uncover the scheme by the museum's curator and his associate in the very style of Scooby-Doo. In this story, Robin is not only Batman's sidekick, but he is also a responsible student, as he decides to stay one night in the Batcave studying and doing homework. This is the first time that we see Jason doing such things, and it's very reminiscent of Dick Grayson when he was a student. Another similarity is that this Jason was again making puns and being quite joyful. He even disguised himself as a ghost to capture the enemies. That's something hard to believe considering the previous stories where he acts violent and aggressive. Overall, these two stories are nothing extraordinary, and the art is also really average. That is mostly because the Batman comic didn't have a regular team. The artists and writers changed in these stories and they didn't seem to have a clear idea of how Batman should act and look. Fortunately, editor Dennis O'Neil noticed this and soon he changed the creative team to something more solid and he hired Jim Starlin as the writer and Jim Aparo as the artist. Both of them were comic book veterans with great contributions in the past. Jim Starlin was responsible for creating Thanos over at Marvel and Mongul in DC, and he also did a couple of Batman stories in the late 70s. Jim Aparo, on the other hand, had already an extensive career with Batman, as he was one of the best Bat artists during the Bronze Age. So it wasn't a surprise that when they started their run in the Batman comic with issue 414, it was something truly unique. The art and the story were excellent, but the only downside was that Robin was not part of that story. Here, there is a new criminal in town, who is murdering innocent young women, cutting their bodies in a brutal way and disposing of them in garbage dumpsters. The criminal has claimed 3 victims and the crimes are seemingly perfect, because the police and Batman cannot find any clue that would lead them to the killer. Batman starts investigating the dumpster killings, but without much attachment to the case. However, all that changes when the killer claims a 4th victim, a young woman called Kate. What makes this different is that Batman knew Kate. He saved her from a fire a few days back and learned that she was a social worker trying to help the poor. Because of her work, she used to walk alone at night in the worst parts of the city, and for this very reason the killer got her and killed her. The case became personal for Batman, and he started searching for the killer with extreme intensity, as a personal vendetta. Because of this, Batman made mistakes and took bad decisions. He was sure he had found the killer, but he captured the wrong criminal. Batman thought the nightmare was over, but soon the killer claimed another victim and Batman knew he had failed, and that for now there was nothing else he could do. As you can see, the story is absolutely great. Probably for the first time in history, a Batman story ends with the criminal not captured. And for now, this story will have to wait, as now we move over to Detective Comics to check out Jason over there. The first Detective comic we'll check out is issue number 579. In this issue, the crime doctor returns to the comics. He is an old villain from the Golden Age, who made very few appearances since then, and now he's back, helping the underworld of Gotham. Here, Robin is more active as Batman's partner, going with him in investigations and helping him during the final fight against the Doctor. In fact, Robin was vital in the capture of the crime doctor, making this the second successful case assisted by the new Boy Wonder. Other than that, the story is quite simple. What is truly important about this issue is that it marked the first regular Batman comic illustrated by Norm Breyfogle. His unique style makes this story something truly wonderful. The dynamic duo and Batman especially look super menacing. The silhouette style in dark shadows make him look amazing. It almost makes me think that Norm's Batman actually inspired the Batman from the animated series, and that is saying a lot. The next couple of detective issues feature Two-Face once again. I find it quite strange that they decided to use the same villain in such a short time. But this is perfect for us, because that means we get another chance to see Jason's reaction to the killer of his father. And just like in the first time, Jason loses his temper once again and almost gets himself killed by Two-Face. He gets lucky and survives, but Batman has to scold him once again for allowing his rage to interfere in their missions. Jason tries to explain himself, but he knows that what he did was just wrong. However, this story has a catch, because Two-Face are in fact two people. The first Two-Face is Harvey Dent, and the second is Paul Sloan. This man was actually the second Two-Face from the Golden Age. He was an actor who recreated Harvey Dent's accident and ended up with his face scarred. Although he had surgery to restore his face, the real Two-Face managed to scar his face again with help from the crime doctor from the previous story. After this revelation, the story gets a bit confusing, because both Two-Faces are part of the story and in general it gets messy. Eventually, the second Two-Face realizes his mistakes and decides to stop the madness and help Batman and Robin capture the real Two-Face. After that, Paul Sloan gets his face restored. By the end of the story, Jason finally manages to control his rage and allows Batman and the police to take Harvey Dent, hoping that he would reform. This is finally a nice development for Jason, who is slowly earning the right to be considered a good Robin. And that is probably the only good thing about that story, because almost everything else was kinda awful. Everything about it was a corny gimmick. Mike Barr was even more obsessed with the number 2 than Two-Face himself. Having two Two-Faces was not enough. The dialogue is also filled with wordplays and puns, using words like twice, double, couple, pair, half, and of course there are more twin henchmen. There are even a couple of panels that read, "To be continued" and "Too late." It's just unnecessary and excessive. It feels like we were back in the campy days of the 60s, and that's just not good for the comics of the late 80s. Not even the art is good enough for that matter. And once again, Mike Barr continues to use characters and references from the old continuity, which was supposed to be over. Thankfully, this was Mike Barr's last story in the regular Batman comics, and big changes started to happen. But before Detective Comics got a new team, something important happened in the DC universe. The event called Millennium had started and many comics were included as tie-ins to the main series. Batman and Detective Comics were part of it, and so a crossover happened between them. Basically, Millennium is about the Guardians of the Universe choosing humans to become the next Guardians, but the Manhunters try to stop them and they start by eliminating Earth's heroes. The way that the Manhunters eliminate heroes is by impersonating people close to them. In the case of Batman, the Manhunters impersonate Commissioner Gordon, and the robot tries to kill Batman. The Dark Knight barely manages to survive the attack, but he knows something is definitely wrong. Meanwhile, Robin is out on a mission to follow the recently escaped Scarecrow to his hideout. Batman told him to only follow Scarecrow and report back the location of the criminal. However, Jason just couldn't stop himself and he enters the criminal hideout to spy on the Scarecrow. After learning the Madman's plan, Jason decides to attack and destroys Crane's fear chemicals, creating a dangerous accident that leaves Crane paralyzed with fear. Batman returns to the Batcave only to find Jonathan Crane still under the influence of the fear gas, and he learns that Jason didn't follow his instructions. Batman is mad at Jason and once again gives him a lesson, but deep inside Bruce is actually impressed that Jason captured the Scarecrow on his own. Nonetheless, Batman still has to solve the mystery of why Gordon wants to kill him, and when he learns that the Commissioner is in Arkham Asylum, he gets an idea. Batman disguises himself as Jonathan Crane, and with help from Alfred and Robin, the dynamic duo infiltrate the asylum in disguise. Robin was disguised as a doctor, and once inside they change to their combat suits to take down the security guards and police officers in the building. Finally, they confront Gordon, but they soon realize that this is a robot and not the real Gordon. While Batman fights the robot, Robin has to create a distraction for the incoming police officers, and what he does? He takes a shotgun and attacks them. When he realizes Batman needs help, he uses the gun to attack the robot, and gives Batman a chance to take some plastic explosive from the utility belt to destroy the robot once and for all. Even after the robot had been destroyed, Robin continues shooting at the guards. Batman stops him and they return to the Batcave, with the head of the robot, which Batman uses to learn the location of the real Gordon. Like this, Batman travels alone all the way to Louisiana, where Gordon had gone to meet an old friend. In that place, Batman and Gordon learn about the Manhunter's conspiracy thanks to Gordon's friend, but they are soon attacked by another robot. Unfortunately, Gordon's friend is killed before Batman could stop the robot. After that, Batman investigates the case and comes across Jim Corrigan, the human host of the Spirit of Vengeance known as the Spectre. Together, they travel to the swamps of Louisiana, where people have spotted a mysterious structure. The heroes find the secret headquarters of the Manhunters in the swamps, and with invisible help from the Spectre, they manage to rescue the people kidnapped by the robots, and the whole place is then destroyed by a member of the Suicide Squad. That marks the ending of the Millennium event in the Batman comics, and it brings some interesting developments to the table. The second part of the crossover is more focused on the Manhunters and how Batman teams up with other heroes to stop them. It's quite simple and straightforward. The first part, however, is much more interesting. Written by Jim Starlin, this story gives us a deep look at the actions of Jason Todd. For instance, this is the first time he is allowed to go alone in search of a criminal and he fails at following Batman's orders. Jason ignored what he was told to do and attacked the Scarecrow, which could have caused serious consequences if he hadn't taken Crane back to the Batcave to be sedated and treated by Alfred. Jason acted recklessly and was careless, but nonetheless it was an impressive feat. However, later on he showed no issue whatsoever in holding a shotgun and using it aiming at people. This is serious. Never before the Boy Wonder had taken a firearm and used it against people. That is just wrong, messed up, no matter how you look at it. Sure, Jason only intended to create a distraction, but it seems quite excessive to be honest. And even more disturbing is the fact that Batman feels a sense of pride in Jason's use of the weapon. He knows he taught Jason how to use guns and he feels good about it, but to me it just doesn't feel right. In this story, Jason starts showing signs of violence and recklessness beyond normal standards. And it's quite natural. The writer of these stories is Jim Starlin after all, and you know what that means. The second Boy Wonder is living on borrowed time. For every good action that Jason has done as Robin, there is a bad one. So maybe he was not precisely the best candidate to become Robin in the first place. But I'll let you decide. Do you think Jason was a good Robin? I think Jason was good, but never as good as Dick Grayson, which leads me to the story that we will check out in the next video, when Nightwing meets Robin for the first time. I know you don't want to miss such an important moment, so go ahead and subscribe and don't forget to leave a like. Until then, Godspeed, my friends.